Good morning and welcome to ICOF's Census 2020 Funder webinar. This is Carrie McCann-Botel, President of the Iowa Council of Foundations. Today we will be discussing how funders can act now to support a fair and accurate census count. Some of you may have participated in our initial webinar about this topic in January. In case you missed it, you can access that recording on the ICOF website. And today's webinar will also be recorded and available there and via a registration link that we will share with you following the webinar. During today's call, we will hear from 3 colleagues who will share information about their work as it pertains to the U.S. Census. Our goals for today are to provide a refresher on the census and what is at stake, examine specific hard-to-count communities in Iowa, learn about census jobs that are available for people in your communities, consider ways your foundation can support filling these jobs, and explore strategies for continued outreach and engagement in your communities. There will also be a chance at the end of our call to ask any questions and share any additional information for needs that you have related to this topic. We do have the chat box function available for you to submit questions during the webinar today. I do have everyone on mute and we'll just unmute our speakers as we move through the webinar, so please use that chat box function. First, we will hear from Dave Geenan, who is the Executive Director of the Doris and Victor Day Foundation in the Quad Cities, working in both Iowa and Illinois. Dave is an ICOF member and also a member of our Board of Directors. And we certainly appreciate his leadership on this issue. Dave is going to kick us off, and then he will introduce our next speakers from the U.S. Census Bureau. So with that, I will go ahead and turn things over to Dave.
Hi, Carrie. Thanks for having me, and thanks for all who are here on this webinar. I'm kind of treating the portion today as kind of a part 2 of what we did the last time. So I'm not going to go through a lot of background check, but kind of just a follow-up from where we were from our last webinar on the census and really how important it is from us as a philanthropic community to partner with our government partners and our nonprofit partners. On the next slide, you'll see one of the things that we've noticed, Carrie, you can move on to the next slide, is what have we heard about the census? So this is what we've heard through a lot of the probably articles and resources you have, that this is the first among the most important civil rights issues of our day, that the census is the foundation for our democracy, and we must guarantee that everyone is counted, that your civil rights are on the line, that completing the 2020 census plays a key role in ensuring an accurate representation for all. Next slide, Carrie. What we've learned is that somehow that doesn't necessarily communicate the importance of the census in our community. The next slide will say what we're learning. And this is kind of the basis of what we're kind of hitting off for what's at stake in Iowa. The question that I want to have for us today is, how are we going to make the census real for people in our communities? How is the census central to the lives as voting and education are to our lives as civic individuals? And how do we tell the story in our communities that make the connections that can evoke an emotional reaction? Excuse my spelling error. This is the narrative that we're using here in the Quad Cities, and that we're partnering with the Census Bureau and our national partners with Get Out the Count, is that the census counts and so do you, so don't miss out. So just a basic overview of what the census is and what Shamiram and from the Census Bureau in Chicago will be telling us, that in your community, if it's not fully counted in the 2020 census, you'll miss out on your political representation, on money for your children's classrooms, on jobs and health and care centers for the next 10 years. So it's about our fair representation and political power. It's about the healthcare options in our communities. It helps determines where our jobs and people are, and it helps provide the teachers and books in the classrooms and food in our kids' belly. If you don't participate in the census, your children could miss out. In 2016, Iowa received about $8 billion in 55 of the federal spending programs. This kind of leads us into when we talk about what's at stake for Iowa. And Shamiram will get more into this as well. The next slide will show you some of those 55 federal spending programs. We know that in the state of Iowa on a whole, 83% of the households participated in mailing in their questionnaire in the last census. So you can see what's at stake with a considerable drop of a percentage, what could do to some of these fundings, to our Title I grants, to our national school lunch programs, to our our Section 8 voucher programs. Next slide, please. I think there might be another one after that, Carrie. What's at stake in Iowa that we'll get into a little bit that hasn't really been done before with the census? So we know that this year, for the first time, the Census Bureau are going to urge households to participate on the census online. And we know that about 19.5% of Iowa's households, about 20%, either don't have internet or have dial-up only. What that tells us is that probably our rural communities have a lot at stake. This was the most recent study that came out of the 6 rural assistant programs by state. I can't have a pointer here, but if you look at Iowa, when you look down at the rural electrification grants, programs such as our water and waste disposal, our rental assistance payments, 36% of the population of Iowa receives funding through these federal programs that are geared toward rural residents. And now we know that 20% of Iowa don't have access to internet. So it pauses us to stop and to think, as philanthropic communities, how do we evoke in our community that the census counts, and so do you. And despite all of these efforts that are being told to us, that we'll hear about later from Shamiram about the challenges ahead of the census, really what it boils down to is creating a narrative that despite all these challenges ahead of us, whether it be adequate funding or the testing or a citizenship question, or if it's be digital, what it really boils down to is, can we as a community help evoke that emotion that I'm done seeing us as a community skip out. I'm seeing our communities go without what we deserve, missing on those medical funding that the states get, missing out on the funding for the schools for those 24 million kids in Iowa, or low-income families that get in our country. I'm done being missed, and I'm going to count because the census counts. That's kind of a brief little bit of what we've been doing at the Day Foundation in terms of why we're engaged at the census level, why we see this as a key opportunity for us to leverage partnerships that comes only once every 10 years, and that what Shamiram from the regional office of the Census Bureau in Chicago will tell us, how it's key to partnerships and boots on the ground to ensure a fair and accurate count in 2020. And these are just other studies that Iowa has about guided programs. A lot of this information is out there, and we'll send some follow-up information for those of you who would like more data. One of the things that we couldn't do this at a local level is without our partners. And one of our wonderful partners is with the US Census Bureau. In our community here, we have a government partner specialist and also a community partner specialist and also a recruiter. All of them that we get to work with here on a local level is key to our getting out the message and out the count that it's safe, and it's participating in the census is key to the vital fabric of the life of our community. And with that, I'd love to hand this off to our partners at the Census Bureau.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Dave and Carrie, for allowing us to join this webinar and giving us the time to discuss ways in which we can ensure a complete and accurate count of everyone residing in the state of Iowa. My name is Shamiram Yukon, and I am a partnership specialist with the Chicago region. I've done lots of work in the Quad Cities, so I'm very happy to be with you this morning. So if we can go to the next slide, Carrie. Thank you. So I'll provide you with a bit of an overview as to why we conduct this census. Then we'll tap into the available census jobs that we have in field and in office, and then we'll talk about some of our challenges, as they've stated. So we conduct the census because we are mandated by Article 1, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution to conduct a head count of everyone residing in the United States once every 10 years. That is everyone regardless of their age, ethnicity, and or citizenship status. Next slide, please. So one of the challenges we're facing this time around is the issue of privacy. Folks are hesitant to respond to the census because they are uncertain if their information will be kept safe. So this morning, I want to let you know that data stewardship is something that's major for us. We are always working and getting training sessions to continuing to be responsible stewards of your data and any data we may come across throughout this process. Next slide, please. In fact, Title 13 of the U.S. Code is the title that gives us authority to do the work that we do. But not only that, it provides a strong protection for your data and your community's data. It is a felony for someone like myself to misuse any piece of information I may come across. So I want to let you know that everything is protected, and our U.S. codes and our laws are on the side of the public when it comes to census work. Next slide, please. So as Dave stated, there is a lot at stake if we end up with an undercount in the state of Iowa. There are over $675 billion that do get allocated annually based on the numbers we submit to the President of the United States at the end of each decennial year. And Dave went over this, but you know, a big portion of that money goes to schools, clinics, roads, bridges, and any other thing you can think about in terms of public services. So my point is that the census is more than just a simple count of the population. Next slide, please. So there are many challenges that we are facing this time around. One of them could be, the major challenge is our hard to count populations. On the screen here, you see a list of groups that the Census Bureau has deemed as hard to count. There are a number of reasons as to why these groups are hard to count. One of the reasons could be the fact that that population is mobile in nature, they're hard to locate and therefore hard to count. Another reason could be the fact that that community or that group of people is dealing with a government distrust issue. They don't want to deal with anything that's coming from the government. Another reason could be unique living conditions for that particular group, or really just lack of understanding as to why the census is important. If you can go to the next slide, Carrie, please. And now this is why we have our community partnership and engagement program in place, our partnership program, which engages folks like yourself, community leaders, to help us disseminate the census message. There are three key components to this program, which are to engage, educate, and encourage participation in the 2020 census. Engaging folks like yourself, you're already engaged, you're on this webinar, so this is an example. And then we hope that after today or after I understand the webinar you've had in the past, you can go on and educate the clients you serve, your communities, or anyone else you represent. Educate them about the importance and the significance of them being counted, and then hopefully you can encourage them to participate when the time comes. The 2020 census succeeds through partnerships with the tribal, state, county, grassroots, faith-based, and business level. Next slide, please. I do want to, before I get into our recruiting here, I want to talk about several ways in which you can assist with supporting what we call self-response. If you aren't aware, this time around we have three methods of responding to the census. Folks can respond via phone, online, or they can do the paper form questionnaire. What's going to happen is that between March 12th and 20th of 2020 of next year, 95% of households will receive postcards inviting them to respond to the census. via phone and online, and that's what we call self-response. A couple of weeks after that, they will receive the actual questionnaire in the mail. If that's the method they prefer, then they can do that. If all of our attempts are ignored, then that household would fall under our non-response follow-up operation, which is when the door knocking happens. So as for now, we ask partners and funders to help people understand that responding to the census is important and it is safe and secured. We want you to encourage folks to respond to mailed or hand-delivered materials from the Census Bureau. You can perhaps, if you have the capabilities to do so, assist people who are disabled. For example, helping a person who is visually impaired dial the appropriate phone number to respond to the questionnaire. If you live in an area where you believe that language assistance is needed, then we ask that you perhaps, if possible, maybe allocate a person who speaks that language, an intern or a volunteer, to help folks understand the questionnaire, though we will have 59 language guides online. You can also serve as what we call a QAC, Questionnaire Assistance Center. So this is where you would send a notice out to the community letting them know that organization X, Y, and Z has opened its doors to assist you with questionnaires when the time comes. So if you have questions, stop by, we will assist you with that. Now, we don't want you to go door to door to collect the information. We will do that, obviously. You shouldn't attempt to collect 2020 census data through websites or apps or anything like that. And then you also should not encourage anyone to respond to the census on behalf of a household in which they do not live in. So with that being said, I'm gonna go into another portion that we ask our partners and funders to support, and funders like yourself, excuse me, to support is our recruiting. We are looking to recruit 2.7 million individuals for all of the states to help us conduct a count of the population. As for the Chicago region, that number is 500,000. Now, the number per state fluctuates often, but I can tell you that in the state of Iowa, as of yesterday, we were at 29.1% of meeting our goal. So let me talk a little bit about these jobs. So we are looking to hire folks from within the community to work in the community. That is the idea here. I'm sorry, Kara, if you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So obviously we are looking to hire for our 32 area census offices within the region. We're looking to recruit census takers, census field supervisors, census field managers, and some clerical and admin positions. All of the applications, or it's one application actually, which is online. So when an applicant submits their application, they will be submitting it for all the available positions. And then depending on the area they applied from and the workload in that particular area, they'll be matched with one or a couple of positions and they can make their choice. The pay is weekly. The training is paid. I did check the pay rates for some of the counties in the state of Iowa for you this morning. And for census takers, it looks like it's around $15 per hour. For supervisory and management positions, that's a couple or $3 more. So we encourage folks that if they've had any sort of supervisory experience in the past, they should indicate that they want to be considered for those types of positions. Next slide, please. The application is on, you can be found at 2020census.gov/jobs. Though that's on my slides, but I will repeat it one more time. That is 2020census.gov/jobs. It is one application. You'd create a profile and then apply that way. As for conditions for employment, applicants must be 18 years or older. They have to have a valid email address, valid Social Security, and be citizens of the United States. Now, as for the actual application, you do not need to submit a resume. You don't need to indicate where you've worked in the past or what school you went to. It's basically just basic personal questions and then some situational questions as part of the assessment. You know, things like how quickly do you adapt to new things? Do you mind constant changes? Do you like working in a team? So that's the beauty of these applications. So we ask as our partners, we ask you to disseminate our recruiting information, encourage folks to also apply for our jobs. As for the time for the actual employment, we like to say that it could be minimum 8 weeks of work. Maximum, it can go up until December 2020. It all depends on when the work is over, basically, in that particular area. So some of the things you can do, as they've stated, you have a local community partnership specialist in your area, and you also have a governmental one. If you are a municipality or community-based organization, you can reach out to the appropriate partnership specialist and perhaps hold what we call applicant days. Applicant days are basically where you would invite interested candidates or members of the community to come in to your center. And what we will do is we will send our partnership specialist or a recruiting assistant who will assist folks with applying for census jobs on the spot on that particular day. You can also hold what we call champion days. Champion days is a day that you can allocate to recruiting. The difference is that on champion days, folks don't apply on the spot. You're just kind of, our person from the Census Bureau is talking about these jobs, passing out information. So that's another thing you can do from your area to assist with census outreach efforts and the whole process, if you will. If you can go next, Carrie, please. I just want to give you a brief overview on what we're doing in terms of operations. This past August, we began our first major field operation, which is address canvassing. Address canvassing is where we go to certain neighborhoods and verify the actual addresses, not the folks living inside, but the actual addresses. And this is to make certain our census roster is up to date. So that operation is from August till this October. After that, you know, our self-response period will begin. Meanwhile, we will continue to work on opening up our area census offices in the state of Illinois and in the state of Iowa and the whole region. Then we will prepare for April 1st, 2020, which is Census Day. Following that, we'll conduct the non-response follow-up operation for selected households. Then we will deliver the counts to the president, who will then deliver the counts to the states. Next slide, please. So what I want to briefly introduce to you this morning are two mapping tools that are available to you. These mapping tools are a great way to determine how your state or county or city did in the past 2 decennials and how we predict they may do right in the upcoming 2020 census. So it's a great way to kind of look at these mapping tools and determine your census outreach efforts that way. For example, the first mapping tool is called the 2010 Male Participation Rate Map, or MPR is how we refer to it. This particular map captures data from the previous 2 decennials, and it lets you know that the percentage of households that self-responded. Of course, in 2010, the only way to respond was the paper form, the actual questionnaire. So if you see on the table on the screen, you see that the state of Iowa had, as a whole, had a 79% of folks who actually responded. Now, the data from this map does not pertain to data that was collected during the door knocking in 2010. So it's only the folks that self-responded, if you will. As a nationwide rank, the state of Iowa did well, it was number 3, next to the state of Indiana. But, you know, there's always room for improvement. So what I did, if you can go to the next slide, Carrie, is I pulled up data on the state, county, and city level for you to take a look at. For example, the state of Iowa in the 2000 decennial was at 82% participation rate. 2010, it dropped by 3%, 79. As for Polk County, in 2000, they were also at 80%, dropped by 1%. And then for Des Moines, for instance, both in years 2000 and 2010, they were at 76%. Now, we like to see percentage rates in the 80s, so anything that's in the 70s, catches our attention, if you will. But this is a great way of, to determine how your community did and what might be needed in terms of census outreach efforts. The other map on the next slide that I want to briefly talk to you about, which is also available to you, is called the Response Outreach Area Mapper. Now, this particular mapping tool is the opposite of the other one. So the MPR map captures our history. This particular mapping tool, the ROAM, predicts current and future trends. What it is that the main component of this particular map is what we call the low response score, or LRS. Low response score is something that we always pay attention to as partnership specialists to determine which census tracts need our attention. So if you can go to the next slide, Carrie, please. For example, I actually put in the address, just as an example, the address of the Iowa Council of Foundations. Hopefully I got the address right, but it gave me information about that particular tract. What it's telling me, if you see in red, the low response score is 27.3%. That means that the Bureau predicts that 27.3% of the folks living in that census tract will most likely not respond to the census. At the Census Bureau, anything that's 20% or above is considered high for us. So that's an area we have to pay attention to. Then after we notice a high LRS, then we look at other factors that this mapping tool provides to see what kind of outreach efforts do we need to engage in. For example, it gives us the total population. It gives us the percentage of seniors living in that census tract, percentage of young adults, percentage of folks living below poverty level. And it also, I don't know if you have the slide that goes after this, Carrie, to the continuation of the, yes, thank you very much. Then it goes on to tell you the percentage of folks who are foreign born and anyone who reported speaking English less than very well and perhaps speaks another language. Now, such information was captured based on a 5-year estimate of the American Community Survey, particularly years 2013 through 2017. This is a great mapping tool that's available to you. I recommend that you utilize it to kind of determine what it is that you need to do. For example, if I take a look at my census tract and I'm a community leader and I see the percentage of seniors is high, then that should give me the idea that perhaps I need to send out a notice and let our senior folks know that we're here to assist you with maybe dialing the phone number to respond to the questionnaire or help them get online and things of that nature. Another thing is if I see that I have, for instance, a high percentage of folks who reported speaking Spanish better than English, then maybe I need to get an intern or a volunteer who speaks Spanish who can assist folks during the process. The other thing that this map shows you, which is great, is percentage of households who reported having computers or only smartphones or no internet access. So if my percentage is high when it comes to that aspect, then I know that I want to perhaps provide computers and Wi-Fi access when the time comes, if I am able, as an organization. Of course, we always ask our partners not to overburden themselves. We ask you to do what you can or utilize events and resources you already have. For example, if you have a community event of any sort or a festival coming up or whatever the case may be, we ask you to perhaps reach out to your appropriate partnership specialist in the area, let them know this is happening so that we can come in, pass out some information, maybe have a table that's for recruiting or census information. If you already have, for instance, if you already are an organization that often posts things on social media, we ask you to post something about the census. So these are the type of outreach efforts we ask you to engage in. Of course, at the end of the day, you know your community better than we do. You know what type of outreach efforts or methods would work with them best. For instance, there are communities that the only way to get to people is via mail, and particularly water bills. So we have those mayors including notices within water bills. We have other communities that are high and they have a high percentage of young adults, so they're mostly relying on communications and social media. That's the idea here. Carrie, if you can go to the next slide, please. So that's it for my slides. Now I'm happy to answer any questions. I understand there's a Q&A session towards the end, correct?
Yes, I don't have any questions submitted yet, Shamira. I was wondering if you might talk a little bit about the extra resources that you had emailed to me that I'll include in the follow-up email, just so people know what to expect with those resources.
Yes, yes. So I believe you're referring to our, for instance, our partners pages where they can collect tools and materials. Is that correct, Carrie?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, yes. So we have a bunch of tools and materials and fact sheets to assist our partners in sending out census messages. We don't want to overburden you with printing stuff and trying to come up with things. Of course, you can design your own fact sheets utilizing our verbiage, of course, and our wording and talking points, but you don't have to do that. So all of that stuff is available to you. You can simply go to www.census.gov, and then you would go to information 4, scroll down, you'd see partners. Once you click on partners, you scroll down, you'll see somewhere in the bottom where it says tools and materials. You click on that and you will have a bunch of fact sheets and tools in which you can download and utilize to send out to your clients and community members. Some of these materials are audience focused. So some of them, for instance, are for faith-based organizations in particular. Some of them are targeted towards children. Some of them are general. Some of them are about our privacy and security and how we help ensure everyone's data is kept confidential and things of that nature. So all of these things are available to you. As for the mapping tools, they're also available. The URL is included in the slides, but to make it easier for you, you can simply go to Google, and for the male participation rate map, you can just type in male participation rate map and it'll pull up for you. For the response outreach area mapper, you can simply type in ROAM, R-O-A-M, census into Google, it'll come up for you. You would just type in the address that you're looking for, and it will give you data for that particular census tract. If you ever have a big event coming up and you're looking for census swag of some sort, maybe water bottles or tote bags or any promotional items, feel free to reach out to your partnership specialist and let them know that you have an event coming up and you are looking for promotional items. We will be happy to ship those over to you.
Great, thanks, Shamiram. And I have one other question. We talked a lot on our first webinar about the importance of the local complete count committees.
Yes.
We discussed during our planning call for the webinar, obtaining the list of the Iowa complete count committees that you have contact information for in your office. Is that something that's still possible to receive, so I can get that out to folks who are participating on the webinar?
We can definitely get you that information. I will reach out to our supervisory partnership specialist for the state of Iowa, who's Martel Buckley, who unfortunately could not make it on today's webinar, but I will obtain that information from him and I will make certain that you have it. That information is actually public on a map that we have within the census.gov website. There is a map that's called CCC map, and it kind of gives you an idea of where we already have formed partnerships and formed complete count committees. So I will definitely get you that information regardless, as soon as I can. But yes, you mentioned complete count committees. Complete count committees are essential to the work that we do in the field. The main objective of these complete count committees is to help us tap into our hard to count populations, and particularly encourage those who are less likely to respond. Now, these committees can be a committee of one person, or they could be a committee of 20 people. It all depends on your capabilities as an organization. Now, if you are an organization who wants to help out with census outreach efforts, but does not want to form a complete count committee, that's perfectly fine. Anything you can do in support of the 2020 census message, we appreciate and consider you a partner.
Great, thanks, Shamiram. I'm going to go ahead and turn things back over to Dave for some final ideas about strategy and outreach.
Hi, thanks, Carrie and Shamiram. I think we necessarily aren't going to stop on this page, I don't think. The two things that I guess I wanted to kind of lift up a little bit from what I'm hearing today. One is the concern that only 29.1% of the workforce or hiring goals are being met in Iowa. And so from a local community standpoint, what that means from us as philanthropic organizations is truly an opportunity for a partnership that we can help resource some of our nonprofits, but also help create an avenue for the Census Bureau to have a crowd of applicants. Some of the things we've done here at the Day Foundation with our funding partner across the river of the Regional Development Authority have been kind of attaching ourselves to planned events happening in our community. So a neighborhood organization that is about block club meetings and getting to know your neighbors and doing a little bit of neighborhood revitalization, had their annual gathering this fall. Each community in Iowa has someone who is assigned to them as a recruiting specialist. So we reached out to ours, Teresa was her name, and she was present on site for a press release for announcing the block club, that the Census Bureau was going to be there and there was jobs. Our partners from the library were there to help folks in an actual computer lab, help people apply on the spot. We fund a nonprofit organization here, an initiative called Opportunities Quad Cities. It's kind of like a Ruby Payne model of Pathways Out of Poverty. They had their annual Super Saturday gathering, and we were able to invite the Census Bureau and Sunday Saunders, who's our recruiting specialist here in Rock Island County, to be there, and it was one of the largest events they've had to date, this initiative, and a lot of it had to do with the draw of having a Census Bureau there. Just to have someone with an official title show up always draws a crowd when it creates jobs. So we have the opportunity to really, at the very minimum of not much of an investment of cost at front, just to make some connections to that list of those partner specialists that hopefully we'll get out to you. I guess as a philanthropist, I would encourage those on the call, when we share those lists with you, to reach out to these government specialists or these community partner specialists. I have an extra space in the Day Foundation office, and I've allowed that desk to be used if our local census workers needed a place to hang for a couple hours, or they wanted some free internet, or they wanted to have a meeting. So those are just like little things we can do that really shows that we're partnering together to help where the areas are. And what I'm hearing now is really a big need to help get out the word about these jobs that are coming, and then help promote events and find ways to tag along events to promote jobs, especially in the state of Iowa. Thanks, Carrie.
Very good. I'm going to go ahead and unmute Dave and Shamiram and see if any questions come in, just so we're ready to respond to those. I'll just share a brief response that the ICOF Board of Directors had following a very similar presentation to this that we did at our August board meeting. I think a couple things really rose to the top for our board members as things that they could do as funders to act now. One is to help promote the jobs in partnership with organizations already located in your community to connect people with job opportunities. So please consider sharing that information and thinking about folks who are connected with community members and helping them locate jobs. That's a really sort of easy first step and follow up to this webinar. The other thing that we had a pretty significant conversation around is just the grantee partners that we work with as funders and how we can connect them with some of this information. So I'll encourage you, if it makes sense, to send the link to the recording of this webinar to share information, or to connect some of your grantee and nonprofit partners with the resources that Shamiram has provided that we'll share in follow-up. We really hope that you can, flex your muscle as a connector and a network builder as a funder, and, just to realize that this work doesn't always require grant resources, and dollars being pushed out into the community. A lot of it can happen through relationships. So just thought I would share that as part of the great dialogue we had in August. I don't see any questions coming in here. Dave or Shamiram, I'd ask if you have any kind of final thoughts that you'd like to share with the group.
You can go ahead, Dave.
Not really. I would just appreciate this time to anytime we can talk about census. I've made a commitment that no matter where I am in the community this year, if it's at a check giveaway or if it's at a meet and greet or an annual meeting, if I'm not talking about the census from now until April, I'm not doing my job to promote this fair and accurate count. We have one shot to get this right every 10 years, and I like to change the narrative here locally of saying, however, we have one opportunity that only comes 10 years where we really get to flex our convening powers in our local community as a philanthropist and local connector to get all of the sectors that are impacted by the census working together for a common goal, that we all are counted once and we're all counted accurately.
Most definitely. And if I can add something, you're very right, Dave. Final thoughts, I would say there are two major things to focus on right now in the state of Iowa and the entire region. Number one, push for these census jobs. We have to meet our goal in terms of recruiting to be able to send folks to the field in order to achieve an accurate and complete count of everyone residing in the state of Iowa. And then the number two thing would be obviously raising awareness about the importance of census participation. What I can do from my end after today's webinar, I'm going to send you, Carrie and Dave, recruiting flyers. If you don't already have them, I'll email you a link to our partners page, direct link. I will also send you a list of all the complete count committees in the state of Iowa, government and community-based. And then I'll also send you a list of the government and community partnership specialists that are in the area so that folks know who to reach out to. And that way they can, go on with next steps. Thank you.
That sounds great, Shamiram. Thanks so much for sharing the additional resources to help people engage in this work. We're certainly happy to partner with you in getting that distributed to our network. As I mentioned earlier, we did record today's webinar, and I have several other materials that I'll get to you, including the slides from today's webinar, in hopes that you can share these resources with other members of your team and other colleagues in your communities that you think will be helpful in helping to engage folks in this fair and accurate count. Big thanks to Shamiram and Dave for the message that you shared today and your help in coordinating the webinar, and a special thanks to Dave for his leadership in the state on this. I had a member say to me, thanks to ICOF for leading on this issue, and I said, oh no, the credit definitely goes to Dave for his commitment to this work and his leadership in this area, specifically on the ICOF Board of Directors. So thanks, Dave. I certainly appreciate that. And with that, I will go ahead and wrap things up, and thank you all for joining us today. And please feel free to reach out if you have any other questions or if there's anything else we can provide you to help support your work in this area. Thanks so much, and hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.